Oh, hello. Your requested file is processing. Please note, the library is not responsible for outcomes of illegally accessing restricted files. Thank you. Goodbye for now.
I stood in the cockpit of the stolen transport vessel as we pulled away from the bay and into that chaotic hell-red sky. We were dodging explosions and bullets from every direction. 1,000 questions then came gushing out of me, something I normally would not do, by the way. How did he get the defenses online? Where did he get the ship? What did he do with mine? Stuff like that. And right after the clown dodged a fellow escaping vessel, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I seriously, really, honestly, do not have time to explain." And then we took a direct hit from the right side. He said some things I won't repeat here. Finally, we broke orbit, and the silence of space quieted the whole ship. He let out a deep sigh and leaned back, closing his eyes, smiling. I cleared my throat. "Where are we going?" He opened one eye, looking at me. "You really can't let me enjoy anything, can you?" He leaned forward and adjusted some settings on the console. Then across the ship, audio played.
"Taking heavy losses. Sectors 1 through 19 are unsafe. I say again, through 19 are unsafe. Rendezvous at Delta. Casualties are high. Need assistance. Say again, need assistance."
He shut it off and leaned back. And it repeats over and over. I knew things were bad, but this made my stomach drop. I slouched against the cold wall and quickly collapsed to the floor. How many do you think made it out? It took him a while to answer, but finally, in a quiet voice, I heard him say, "Not enough."
Earth filled the cockpit screen as I listened to the radio broadcast.
Through 19 are unsafe. Rendezvous at Delta. Casualties are high. Need assistance.
A ring of debris hung around Earth. But then, in the distance, ships were returning to Earth. I descended into the atmosphere and followed the signal. As I crested a ridge, I saw it. A traveler, protecting the last of humanity like a bird protecting her nest. My ship landed and was taken from me immediately. As I walked away, I can feel their eyes on me. My now black robes, swirling around me, seemed to draw the gaze of every man, woman, and child. Yet when I looked at them, not one of them could meet my gaze. I walked aimlessly at first, but something was guiding me. As I came to an opening where I saw a small group of weathered soldiers, a tall figure clad in white and golden armor from head to toe. He had a glow about him, and I stood and watched for a moment. When he finally noticed me, he froze, his golden visor holding my gaze as he nodded and walked over to me. We did not speak. His armored gloves were covered in blood, but this blood was red. Behind us a voice spoke from the shadows. "You two don't talk much, do you?" A man clad in the most ridiculous outfit I have ever seen appeared. Purple, yellow, silver. He looked like a fool. "Well, that's fine. I can talk more than enough for all of us." He spoke with false confidence. But at this point, it was better than nothing at all. I looked at them, and then he spoke the question we were all thinking. What brought us here?
We landed behind the city walls and brought the injured to the E station. People were bustling about with an unnatural quiet. But right after we landed, most survivors rushed off to find some sort of official to see if anyone they knew made it off Mars. I remember I went back to the cockpit to say thank you, but when I got there, he was gone. I'm not sure why I was surprised. I walked through the crowds toward the line of people getting housing assignments. I got my stamp and headed to one of the makeshift shelters. I was settling into my temporary housing when I heard it. There it was all over again. The shouting and the panic. I was about to end it. I grabbed a knife off the bunk next to me, I couldn't keep going on like this. Then I looked out the door, and I saw him. I saw a little boy crying. He was alone, next to some folks that looked to be gearing up for more of the same war. That hit me hard. All I had been through. Just imagine seeing it as a kid. I had to do something, you know?
We heard it. The sound of fear blaring over the loudspeakers. We heard the armed men running. The gates! Get to the gates! Without a word, the three of us followed. We ran against the crowd, against the palpable panic. When we arrived, we found a small gathering of confused, frightened people, brandishing objects of death they barely understood. But the weapon in my hand? I understood it well. I walked to the gate and looked through a narrow slit. My newfound companions did the same. Something was coming. Something dark and unnatural, crawling over the abandoned vehicles outside. The loudmouth man sighed as he eyed the horizon. Well, that doesn't look so good. I turned to look at him. The pointlessness of his words was incredibly frustrating. He closed his eyes and backed away. No point in delaying the inevitable. He looked over at a thin, frightened skeleton of a man. Open the gates! The man's eyes got incredibly wide and his mouth hung open. I looked quickly to the golden armored brute standing beside him. The stupidly colorful man spoke again, with force. Open the gates so that we can do what we have to do. The frail man looked at the gold knight for some sort of contradiction, but he just shallowly nodded in agreement. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to say it. Please, the jester said with a smile. The gate began to creak open and a crowd of people gathered behind us. They solemnly handed the jester and I helmets and more rounds for our weapons. Then we turned together and walked slowly out the gate. We were going to bring death today.
A man had come over to me. He saw me crying. He told me it would be okay, that he had a friend who would protect us. I asked him, "You know the Golden Knight too?" He looked kinda confused. He picked me up and we went up with everyone else. We heard the gate open and I was scared again. The man said, "Look, see? The guy who looks like a clown?" I saw the man in purple, a woman in all black, and the Golden Knight. But then there was this sound. Something I don't like to think about.
The kid buried his face into my chest, and I held him. I wasn't a father, never had been, but somehow I knew what to do. The sky was getting darker now, the air cold and electric. I looked out and saw, I don't know how to describe it, a cloud? Black, like smoke, but different. Inside was this roaring and this screaming. The people inside the wall were covering their ears. The kid buried his face deeper into my chest, and I could feel him start to cry. I put my hands over his ears, but I knew it was no use. He would remember this sound for the rest of his life. We all would.
It grew louder and louder. I heard the Golden Knight check his weapon and raise it to his face. The annoying one began to laugh. "Oh, this is crazy. This is just crazy," he said. He sounded idiotic. Enough. I closed my eyes and focused. Through my eyelids, I can see the light of day fading. I felt the air becoming cold. The sounds of death coming, closing in. Then I heard it. Liza's shriek of death came roaring from the storm. My eyes shot open, and I felt it again. There was no peace here. I was afraid.
Everyone was quiet as they watched. The clouds surrounded them, and these things, again, I don't know what they were. They came slowly out of it.
We could barely see them. I heard someone say they were dead. I yelled at them, "No, they're not!" I only knew that if they were dead, we would be dead soon too.
They came crawling, those unnatural things. Hunger filling their eyes. The cold pierced through our armor, and I felt myself shake. I tried to step back, but the other two stopped me. "Steady now, lady," the clown said calmly. "We all have to do our part." I felt an odd warmth from them. I closed my eyes and I focused. There it was. The light. I felt it in the gun in my hand. Then in my soul, a burning like wildfire. The cold vanished and I could feel my strength returning. The shaking in my hands had transformed. It was not fear anymore. I opened my eyes and lifted the rifle to my face, looking down the sights into the eyes of my enemy. My finger placed on the trigger. Then I saw it. The hesitation as they stopped their advance. The hunger replaced by something else. Something I knew too well. The creature of the darkness was afraid, as it should be.
Then they started shooting. They kept shooting. Like an entire army rolled into 3 super beams.
Everyone was cheering. He was destroying everything, and we were cheering even louder.
The knight fired his rifle quickly and precisely. The clown brandished his hand cannon with the confidence of having killed 1,000 times. His hysterical laughter rang out over the screams surrounding us. It was no longer an annoyance, and I felt alive. The world became brighter. My skin felt like the sun. We were feeding off each other. Then, it happened.
The cloud started to roll back, and you're not gonna believe this, but the girl, she leapt into the air and...
I screamed with all the anger, the guilt, the lies pouring out of me like a heat wave. And then the clown stopped laughing. I looked to him and saw him staring at his hands. Whatever glorious thing had happened to me, it was happening to him too.
The clown spun and pulled out his blades. He began slicing them without mercy, their screams fueling this electric rampage. Blue arcs of light pushing the thing back.
The knight kept shooting, the blade was on fire, and the clown guy was moving so fast nobody could keep track.
But that's when it happened.
I saw it out of the corner of my eyes. One of those things had wounded him in the leg. He slid down and screamed in agony. The knight looked over for a mere second, and in that instant, one of the creatures lashed out and knocked him to the ground. I had to help them. The knight was moving slowly, but the clown, he was not moving at all.
The girl, she ran to him, pulled him up and dragged him back. The golden guy lifted himself up, and he clenched his fists. He pushed out with all of his might, and somehow, don't ask me to explain it, but he was shielding them. The creatures moved closer, snarling at him. The dark clouds slowly swept over them, and we couldn't see them anymore.
Everyone stopped cheering. The only sound you could hear was the screaming and rumbling coming from the cloud. People started to run away, but me and the man, we watched, we waited.
I pulled the clown up and leaned him against an abandoned vehicle. The golden man's miraculous shield had confused the screaming darkness around us. It was swirling around, studying us. Then the sound changed. It laughed at us. The clown cringed and spoke. That was my bad. He coughed up some blood. Yeah, I screwed it up. The golden knight knelt down and shook his head. He took off his helmet, and we saw that his mechanical head was caved in on one side, one eye blinking on and off until it finally died. The clown spoke again. I've got this weird feeling. He winced and took a deep breath. This crazy feeling that we've met before. The night finally spoke. Or that we will meet again. The clown smiled and leaned his head back. I placed my hand out and broke my vow one final time. Until we meet again. Done itne rom convenat. The knight put his hand on top of mine, and his one working eye met mine. Done itne rom convenat. The clown slapped his hand on top and smiled even wider, gasping for breath. Sure. Done itne convenat. The knight's shield flickered and died. The creatures moved in and swarmed us, but under our hands, we formed a miracle. A burning, blinding light that grew brighter with each second. I saw the creatures pierce the knight through his chest, but his gaze stayed focused on the growing light. I felt my leg being torn apart, but our hands were locked, and the light continued to grow. I looked at them one last time and closed my eyes. There would be much silence ahead. Until we meet again.
There was a light. It was like lightning, but constant and so bright, all of us left had to shield our eyes.
I felt the hot wind push us to the ground. I thought it was the cloud at first, but we were still alive. We got up slowly and looked around. Then the man rushed over and looked out past the wall. Nobody spoke. We stood there, and then there was cheering. We heard it across the city coming from the other gates too. It was so loud that you couldn't hear anything else. People were dancing and celebrating. They were singing and lifting each other, but the man and me didn't. I looked up to him and asked, "What do we do?"
I looked down at him and didn't know what to say. It looked like we won, but I couldn't shake this feeling, like the siren would go off at any moment. I sat down and I looked at him. I guess I should introduce myself. I stuck my hand out for a handshake. The kid looked at me cautiously and shook my hand back. "Well, what's your name?" He looked down shyly and kicked a rock.
"My name is Michael."
Then he looked me in the eyes.
Michael O'Malone.